Hi and welcome to the QRI-5 Chapters 6 and 8, Administration and Scoring of Word List. The purposes for administering the word list are 1. To find out the passage point at which we will start. Which passage levels will we start at based on their success with the word list? Are students able to identify words automatically within that 1 second, which is what they should be able to do with these sight words? When I mark the words that they say incorrectly and write them to the best of their pronunciation, I can then do an analysis to see what kind of letter-sound correspondence, what kind of letter-sound matching we have going on. I can also look at the medial sounds, those vowel sounds, to see are they getting the right vowel sounds. I can also compare the words in isolation to the words in context, because in the passages, those words that are underlined are the words that are on the word list. When I administer the word list, I usually start 2 grade levels before their grade placement. I have the students move the cards themselves if I've made index cards. I allow them to move the window box if I'm doing a sheet of paper where I've made a box where only one word is shown at a time. Or if I'm doing a PowerPoint, they can press the computer enter each time we're ready to move to the next word. On the scoring sheet, which starts on page 105, I have the word list. The students read it. I mark with a check, a plus, if it is identified automatically within that 1 second, or if it's just identified. If they mispronounce the word within a second, I write under identified automatically and the sounds of the words which they pronounce to the best of their pronunciation. So if they said can and they said keen, then I would probably write a K, E, long E on it and an N. If they self-correct, I write SC. Typically, if they self-correct, it is in the identified section because it has taken longer than a second. The procedures for scoring the word list: we typically score them immediately. We identify them if it's their independent, instructional, and frustration level, and I use the independent word list score to tell me where to start with the passages. If a child read the word list in first grade or below, I also administer the analogy word list, which is on page 111, where I can compare their ability to manipulate the onset. They're using the phonogram. They change that initial onset, replace it with another letter, sound. Can my students make that transition? When I'm scoring my word list, at the bottom of each of the word list, there's a box, and the box says independent, instructional, and frustration. Pre-primer 1 only has 17 words. All of the other lists have 20 words. The independent for the pre-primer 1 is 15 to 17 words correct. The instructional is 12 to 14 words correct, and the frustration is below 12. The levels for the word list with 20 words is independent, 18 to 20, instructional, 14 to 17 words correct, and frustration is anything below 14 words correct. I start my passages, and it's usually wherever the student scored independent on their word list. I also always start with narratives. If it's a lower level reader, I also use narrative with pictures. The students will read orally. I find their instructional level in the narrative. Once I find their instructional level, I give them the expository passage at that same level. Because in my classroom, my students are required to read 50% narrative, 50% expository, but I need to know when I give these expository passages, what level are they reading, what level expository would they need to be successful to read with a little instruction. If I find the instructional level first, I move down to a lower level to then find the independent level. and then I would later move up to find the frustration level. I try to wait and find the frustration level last because of my students' self-esteem, self-perception, and then ability to perform on the rest of my test. If for some reason you started a passage and it starts off and it's their frustration level and they are so frustrated, you may need to stop, give them a break, and come back and try again and start at a lower level. If you find they're an independent level first, great, and you've built up all this confidence, then you slowly start moving to higher levels. Then you hopefully find their instructional and then their frustration. Use your own judgment as to how you should move up or down and when you should stop. Read silently an expository text if they are at the 3rd grade level or higher. This can be the silent reading passage. When we're doing passages, we find out if the text is familiar or unfamiliar. We're not expecting one or the other. All it's going to tell us is, with research, if it is familiar, I should expect my students' performance in comprehension and in word recognition to be higher because they're already familiar with the concept. Now, if they're familiar with the concept and they do not score very high in word recognition or comprehension, then they're not taking that knowledge and putting it to use, and then that would be one of my recommendations. If my students are unfamiliar with the concept, then I can kind of expect them to not be as successful. You would note this in your summary, your case study. Here is the scoring. The word read plus the comprehension question gives me my overall passage score, and that is what I'm looking for. I need the independent overall passage score, the instructional, and the frustration. If they scored independent on word recognition, but scored independent on comprehension, it's still independent. If they scored independent on word recognition and instructional and comprehension questions, the level is instructional. If they scored word recognition independent and comprehension frustration, the overall passage is frustration. Whichever is the lower score is the overall passage score. If words read were instructional and comprehension was independent, the overall level is instructional. Instructional, of course, is instructional. Word recognition is instructional and comprehension is frustration. The overall passage is considered frustration. If word recognition is frustration, the overall passage will be frustration. If they have independent on their comprehension, but word recognition was frustration, it is still frustration. Word recognition was frustration and comprehension was instructional, it is frustration. And without even having to put it, word recognition frustration and comprehension frustration would definitely be frustration. If read silently, you determine the total passage level by simply asking the comprehension questions, and that score determines your overall passage. You do not have a word recognition score because they read silently. Hope this helps you.